Order, please. We'll now begin with the daily routine, beginning with presenting and reading of petitions, presenting reports of committees, tabling reports, regulations, and other papers, statements by ministers, government notices of motion. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, I'm moving this on behalf of the Premier. I hereby give notice that on a future day I should move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas human trafficking and sexual exploitation are devastating to victims and survivors, families, and entire communities, and we are committed to ensuring Nova Scotians have every opportunity to live safely in the place they call home. And whereas human trafficking crimes disproportionately affect women and girls, and we know that it will take the combined efforts of government, law enforcement, community organizations, and citizens working together to create meaningful and lasting change. And whereas earlier today, government announced an additional investment of $1.4 million each year over the next 5 years to support new and current initiatives to fight human trafficking crimes with an added focus on Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian communities, and to ensure survivors have access to the services and programs they need to heal and move forward. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the many community organizations and our partners in law enforcement and public prosecution services dedicated to fighting this devastating crime, and stand together in recognition of Human Trafficking Awareness Day this Saturday, February 22nd. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall, number one, read and table the message from His Honour the Lieutenant Governor transmitting the estimates of sums required for the service of the province for the fiscal year ending March 31, 2020 for the consideration of this House. Number two, table the estimate books. Number three, table a government business plan. Number four, table the Crown Corporation's business plans. Number five, table the estimate and Crown Corporation's business plans resolutions. Number six, deliver my budget speech. And number seven, move that the estimates of sums required for the service of the province for the fiscal year ending March 31, 2021 being supplied to be granted to His Majesty, and the Crown Corporation's business plans be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Supply.
The motion is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to make an introduction.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw the attention of the members to the East Gallery, where I'd like to introduce a couple of special guests, and I'd ask that they rise when I recognize them. Natalie Beglow is a certified therapeutic recreation specialist and the president of Nova Scotia Therapeutic Recreation Association, and Heather Baker is a recreational therapist with the Nova Scotia Health Authority. I would ask the members of the House to join me in welcoming our guests today and thank them for the important work they do in supporting Nova Scotians living healthy.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas therapeutic recreation services help people with physical, cognitive, social, and emotional limitations by supporting their recovery, health, and well-being, and whereas recreation professionals are dedicated to developing and ensuring that leisure is an important element to help improve the quality of life of many Nova Scotians, and whereas February is National Therapeutic Recreation Month, an opportunity to recognize and support the work of recreational therapists in many settings throughout our province, therefore be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly join in recognizing National Therapeutic Recreation Month and the contributions of therapeutic recreation professionals as they support Nova Scotians through their recovery. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. We'll now move on to introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labour Standards Code, respecting leave.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labour Standards Code, respecting leave.
Bill number 220, an act to amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labour Standards Code, respecting leave.
Ordered that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labour Standards Code.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labour Standards Code.
Bill number 221, an act to amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labour Standards Code.
Ordered that this bill be read a second time on a future day. We'll now move on to notices of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on a future day I should move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Boat Harbour Act prohibits the use of Boat Harbour as an effluent treatment facility for the reception of effluent from Northern Pulp on or after January 31st, 2020, and Northern Pulp does not have an approved plan to treat effluent from the mill, and whereas members of the government's forestry transition team admit publicly that they are still coming to grips with the impact of the closure of Northern Pulp and that the impact will have on families, and concede that they do not know the number of people who may lose their jobs, and whereas Nova Scotians who are facing an uncertain future deserve to be heard by members of the House of Assembly who passed that law and should be the ones who listen to the affected families and search for answers. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly shall select a committee that's constituted of 9 members of the House of Assembly, 5 chosen by and representing the government caucus, 2 chosen by and representing the official opposition, and 2 chosen by and representing the third party. B, that the committee shall select its chair. C, notwithstanding paragraph 1 of Rule 61 of the Rules and Forms of Procedure, the chair of the committee only has a vote in the event of a tie. D, pursuant to subsection 36(1) of the House of Assembly Act, the committee is not dissolved by the prorogation of the House and shall continue its inquiries after the House is prorogued. E, the committee shall consult as many interested and impacted persons as it reasonably can, including persons from the forestry industry, displaced mill workers, and persons from associated businesses. And F, within 6 months, the committee shall report its findings and recommendations of the House Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. We'll now move on to statements by members. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize a special person in my community. Everyone knows Neil Rayberg as a 4th-degree member of the Eastern Lodge 866 Buffalo Club. Neil was recently recognized in the Chronicle Herald for his work as an MDR technician at the Dartmouth General Hospital in the new state-of-the-art sterilization facility. Neil also represented the Dartmouth General staff when he competed nationally in the Halyard Rap Race, winning 1st place, and then competing in San Antonio, Texas in 2016 and Nashville in 2017, where he won 1st place in the North American competition both years. Mr. Speaker, I ask all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature to join me in thanking Neil Rayberg for his dedication to his work and his commitment to protecting the health of all Nova Scotians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the remarkable citizens from across the province, including the ones who are outside the legislature today, who have mobilized to protest this government's hidden decision to remove Owl's Head Provincial Park from the list of pending protected areas. I would also like to recognize many volunteers across the province who act as stewards and caretakers and who serve on associations and citizen groups with the aim of preserving and protecting special pieces of Crown land. Many of them are now feeling like their labour of years could be jeopardized by deals brokered in secret. The province held meetings in 20 communities and conducted nearly 1,500 interviews with park users and non-users to gather input that shaped out the Our Parks and Protected Areas Plan. Owl's Head is identified as site number 694. It is not just about hitting an arbitrary 13% of protection.
The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Dave McDougall and Paul Doucette won the Open Division of the 2020 Nova Scotia Stick Curling Championships held in Yarmouth during the weekend of February 14th and 16th. This was their 4th title in the last 5 years. Earlier this month, Dave McDougall and John Cameron won the Nova Scotia Competitive Stick Curling League Championship in New Glasgow. This is on top of an impressive curling career which has seen many championships and titles. I'd like to ask this House join me in congratulating Yarmouth's Dave McDougall, Paul Doucette, and John Cameron on their impressive careers and on winning these recent championships, and wish them continued success in the sport of stick curling. They've made all of us proud, Mr. Speaker, and they've been great ambassadors for their communities. Thank you so much.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to stand in my place today to recognize and congratulate Harvey Realties Limited of Quebec as they begin to celebrate a half-century in business. Before 1970, Catherine E. Harvey, owner and founder, who passed away just last year, recognized the need for a licensed real estate broker in Victoria County. Through the years, Harvey Realties Limited, with Catherine's daughter, Kathy, now as the broker owner, her sister, Betty Menzies, along with Terry Brewer, Robert Wambold, Roy McRae, and others before them, have and still continue to provide well-informed, reliable service to a network of local, American, and European clients. I ask all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature to join me in congratulating Kathy Harvey and staff at Harvey Realties Limited, and wish them a very happy 50th anniversary and all the best in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge the launch of the African Nova Scotian Heart Health Outreach Program at the Dartmouth General Hospital. Mr. Speaker, the Dartmouth General is the 3rd busiest hospital in the province, and in its catchment are several of Nova Scotia's historic Black communities, including East Preston, North Preston, Cherrybrook, and Lake Loon. We know that African Nova Scotians do not access health care at the same rate as other residents. One outcome of this is negative and worrying cardiac health outcomes. This program is intended to study the underlying reasons for this discrepancy and improve cardiac health diagnosis and treatment for African Nova Scotian communities at the Dartmouth General. As we continue to celebrate African Heritage Month, I'm pleased to see informed research into the health of African Nova Scotians become a priority in Dartmouth, and to celebrate the leadership of Dartmouth General Hospital, and in particular Sharon Davis Murdoch, in this regard.
The honourable member for Bedford.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to congratulate Emily Alford for her extensive volunteer contributions to the Bedford Legion Branch 95. Emily is a regular volunteer at weekly bingo and other fundraising events. She willingly does whatever task is asked of her, and she does it with a smile. She often mentors other students who volunteer there. Emily has received certificates of appreciation for volunteerism from the Legion, and these are awards that have never before been issued to a minor at our Legion. Emily is a very busy young woman. She's in grade 10 French immersion at Lockview High. She also just happens to be Canada's junior girls national champion in darts, and together with her partner, she's the junior mixed doubles champion as well. Just this past weekend, Emily won the Nova Scotia Junior Girls Provincial title for the 5th time in a row, and I should mention that at the National Championships in Saskatoon last May, Emily also won the Sportsmanship Award. Emily is passionate about fair play, good sportsmanship, and helping others, so this award was no surprise to her friends at the Bedford Legion. She has a bright future ahead.
The honourable member for Sydney River Myra Lewisburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on January 21st, 8:50 in the morning, the Comer family got a little bit bigger. John Samuel Colmer was born at a whopping 9 pounds and 8 ounces. His big sister Maria, mother Jennifer, and I were overjoyed. We are all blessed with the opportunity to raise our children in this great province. As this session begins, I think it is important we keep in mind the sacrifices that all of our families make to allow us the opportunity to sit in this legislature. I am thankful for my newborn son, my daughter, my wife, my family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, tonight, like last night, shelter beds will be full in Halifax. The Out of the Cold shelter will pop up at 8 p.m. at the Mi'kmaq Friendship Centre on Gottingen Street. Thanks to that organization's incredible generosity and 350 volunteers, plus a small core of staff, some 30 people will have a place to sleep, but they will not have a home. Shelters like food banks are responses to a deeply broken society marked by severe poverty and marginalization amongst affluents. We know that secure, safe, supportive housing is the first step towards improved health and stability for individuals who have typically experienced trauma. Housing First models work, and it works here in Halifax for 50 individuals, but the program is full and is not accepting new clients. The province, with the city and with federal partners, must recognize the foolhardiness and unsustainability of shelters that don't alleviate long-term pressures on our health and justice systems and don't allow people to thrive. Thank you.
The honourable member for Antigonish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, February 3rd, I had the honour of attending the installation of the new bishop for the Diocese of Antigonish. Bishop Wayne Kirkpatrick was appointed as the 10th Bishop of Antigonish by His Holiness Pope Francis on December 19, 2019. His installation, held at St. Ninian Cathedral, had hundreds in attendance, which was a great welcome for someone new to our community. Coming from Ontario, this is Bishop Kirkpatrick's first time living on the East Coast and in Nova Scotia. So I asked my fellow members of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly to join me in congratulating Bishop Kirkpatrick on his recent appointment and welcome him to our beautiful province. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to make an introduction.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery, we have members of the Kinsman, Kinnett, and King clubs here in Nova Scotia. We have Mr. Pat Bowers, and I'd ask you to stand, please, and be recognized. He is the Atlantic District Governor here in Atlantic Canada. We also have Mrs. Brenda Dooley, who is the District Coordinator and Secretary and Awards and Recognition Chairperson. Also to Mr. Fabian O'Neill. Mr. O'Neill is President of the Sackville Club. And Kinsman, we have Mr. Bill McFadden, Mr. Wade Dooley, and Mr. Nick Dooley. I'd welcome all people to welcome to this House these members.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate our Kinsman, Kinnett, and King clubs. King Canada, an all-Canadian service organization, has been serving its community since it was founded in Hamilton, Ontario by Hal Rogers on February 20th, 1920, and today marks their 100th anniversary. To date, King clubs across Canada have contributed more than $1 billion to Canadian communities and disaster relief programs beyond our borders. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that all members of the House of Assembly join me in congratulating the accomplishments and dedication of each member, past and present, of the Kinsman, Kinnett, and King clubs over the last 100 years, and thank them for keeping Hal Rogers' wish alive of, quote, serving the community's greatest need, unquote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I make an introduction as well?
Permission granted.
Thank you. I'd like to draw the members' attention to the gallery opposite, where we have a number of leaders in our labour movements today joining us. We have Nan McFadgen, who is the president of CUPE Nova Scotia, Danny Kavanagh, who's the head of the Nova Scotia Federation of Labour, Paul Wozni, who's the head of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, Jason McLean, who is the head of the Nova Scotia General Employees Union, NSGEU, and Mary Otto, who's a member of the NSGEU. So please warmly welcome them all. These folks are heartily and committedly representing thousands, tens of thousands of workers in Nova Scotia every day, and we thank you so much for all that you do for workers in Nova Scotia. Thank you.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Mr. Speaker, since the beginning of this year, there's been a disturbing trend among the folks who we are helping in my office in Dartmouth North. A larger than normal proportion of people that come to us for help have been single mothers, all of them struggling to keep or find affordable housing. Take, for example, one of my constituents, a single mother with 5 children. This woman relies on income assistance as well as the Canada Child Benefit, and she was recently evicted. Unable to find affordable housing or a place that will take her and her children or accept her Canada Child Benefit as income, this woman was, until today, living in a hotel room with all 5 of her children, funded by DCS. She has just been given notice by the hotel that she needs to leave it by Friday. This woman and many, many like her are bearing the brunt of poverty, paltry income assistance rates, and the current housing crisis. We must and we can do better for these women and their children. And I call on all of my colleagues in this House to work toward a real solution for people living in these situations. Thank you.
The honourable member for Preston Dartmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize Ms. Carol Ann Dixon of North Preston on operating her own business, CA Nature of Things. For 8 years on Portland Street in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, selling Celtic sea salt, herbal products, and bath sea salts. She now sells the same wonderful products from her home, which affords her time to work on her next project, opening a seniors residence in North Preston. She is an active member of the St. Thomas Baptist Church, where she sings in the choir and conducts some sermons. She also attended the Emmanuel Baptist Church in Hammonds Plains from 2012 to 2015 to study and become a lay pastor. I recognize and congratulate Ms. Carol Ann Dixon for her contribution to the business community and the church.
The honourable member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, after 31 years with the province's largest police force, Stellarton's new police chief, Mark Hoback, has been welcomed with open arms by residents of Stellarton. With more than 3 decades of police service and a wide variety of experience, Stellarton's new chief took control of the 10-member department in November 2019. Mark's previous experience saw him working as a community response officer, school resource officer, an investigator, and a media relations officer. Eventually, he transferred to Criminal Investigation Division, where he supervised the Integrated Drug Unit and Sexual Assault Investigative Team. During his last years, his police duties found him in the department's internal oversight and risk management sections. Chief Hoback believes in maintaining a high level of professionalism with the police department and securing the quality of public safety that citizens deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the Zatzman Sportsplex. This past weekend marked the 1-year anniversary of the redesign of what many still lovingly call the Dartmouth Sportsplex. The new Sportsplex is marked by its commitment to community and inclusivity. From universal change rooms to the pool pod to teen takeover nights and the community access program, the Zatzman Sportsplex is walking the talk. The new facility is a beautifully designed space full of light and incredible artwork by celebrated Indigenous artist Jordan Bennett. The layout is sensitive to varying levels of fitness and ability, allowing space for everyone from the novice yogi to the power lifter to achieve their fitness goals. Please join me in congratulating Max Chauvin, the entire team at the Sportsplex, for making this facility so welcoming and responsive to the community and to my family. It was well worth the wait.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to thank the many organizers, volunteers, and community members for another extremely successful Christmas Mommies and Daddies Telethon. On November 24th, the Friendly Neighbours 25th annual telethon took place at the Aylesford Fire Hall, raising funds to support local families around the holidays. Broadcast on Eastlink Television, the telethon includes a full evening of auctions with talented entertainment. Each year, funds raised go directly to support our neighbours from Colebrook to Kingston with food and and gift hampers this year to community pledges amounted to a grand total of over $20,000. After the telethon, volunteers from the Friendly Neighbours, local Lions clubs, and community came together to assemble hundreds of holiday hampers and deliver them in time for the holidays. I wish to sincerely thank everyone who made it possible for families in our community to receive support, and we look forward to another successful telethon in 2020. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are 4 mills in the constituency of Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley. Hundreds of hardworking men and women, they work at these mills. They count on the forestry industry to keep their jobs and to provide for their families. The Christmas season was one filled with uncertainty, anxiety, and worry for many of my constituents. In the coming weeks, members of this House will disagree at times. But it is my hope that we can unite around our desire to support our constituents who rely on the forest for their livelihood. And I hope we keep them in our minds and hearts as we make decisions, and that we can provide the stability and certainty they need to have a future here in Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax-Chebucto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise this afternoon to recognize the many people who are presently outside this building standing together to say that it was a wrong thing for this government to not care enough about transparency, public will, and public conversation to even let people know when they were designing behind closed doors to sell a piece of Nova Scotia's remarkable coastline that had been understood by the people of the Eastern Shore for many years to have been protected in Owl's Head. I'm pleased to add my voice to this protest against the contempt for public participation in decisions about how our public lands are held, sold, discarded, or developed. And I would like to thank the group of citizens who have assembled here this afternoon at the Legislature for their vocal vigilance, for their commitment and their care towards protecting not just a parcel of our beautiful province, but also in the direction of protecting the principle of transparency and openness and accountability, which is so crucial and pivotal to democratic governance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm particularly excited to share with you the overwhelming generosity of Shooters Bar and Grill and what they mean to our community. Brent and Beth McDonnell have been the owners of this establishment for 5.5 years, and they certainly know the meaning of giving back and are committed to making a difference in our hometown. Just last month, Shooters gave the tremendous donation of $215,000 to Corridor Community Options for Adults from a Jig the Joker fundraiser that they co-chaired in Enfield. Shooters took no proceeds from the fundraiser, opting to give their portion to the wonderful programs, the CCOA, that employs those with special needs. This is just one incredible and reoccurring example of how Shooters Bar and Grill positively affects those they endorse. They sponsor all kinds of events in the community and are always donating the door charges back to the organization hosting the event. From sports teams to individuals with illnesses to the food bank, Beth and Brent are driven to help in whatever way they can to enrich their lives. Mr. Speaker, I ask all members of this House to join me in applauding the immense generosity of Shooters Bar and Grill and thanking the owners. Thank you.
The honourable member for Argyle-Barrington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Acadian skies and Mi'kmaq lands and area comprised of the municipalities of Argyle, Clare, and Yarmouth became North America's first starlight tourist destination and reserve in 2014. Last November, the Acadian Skies and Mi'kmaq Lands received the Education and Diffusion of Astronomy Award at the Starlight Foundation's first International Starlight Awards in Spain. The award is due to the work of Tim Doucette, owner of Deep Sky Eye Observatory in Quinnen, the Société Touristique Bon Temps d'Argyle, and the Starlight Development Committee. Astronomy tourism is a growing sector in southwestern Nova Scotia and welcomes visitors from around the world. Tim continually reminds others of the importance of protecting our region's night skies against light pollution because it's a luxurious natural resource that not everyone has. I ask that all members of this legislature to join me in congratulating the Acadian Skies and Mi'kmaq Lands on their prestigious award and wish them continued success. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to highlight the accomplishments of a respected member of the community of Arishat, a man who has been referred to as a community icon, a man who would have become my future father-in-law. Mr. Speaker, Charles Herman Boudreau, better known to many as Herman, Papa, or Charlie Brown, lost his battle to cancer on Tuesday, February 11, 2020, surrounded at home by his family. Mr. Speaker, Herman was a man of few words, but his quick wit and remarks were phenomenal. Herman was born in Arishat. He made his way to Massachusetts, where he met and married Norma, the love of his life. They returned to Arishat in 1971, along with their two sons, Chuck and Kevin. They entered the funeral profession in 1971 and grew C.H. Boudreau Funeral Home Limited into a dignified and professional funeral home respected by many. Mr. Speaker, Herman was a founding board member of 235 Aero Sea Cadets, a lifetime member of the Knights of Columbus, a member of the Royal Canadian Legion, and a 25-year board member of Enrich Business Development. Mr. Speaker, I ask members of this House to join me in extending our condolences and celebrate the life of a man dearly loved and who helped so many people in his community. Thank you.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Mr. Speaker, African Heritage Month is a time for Nova Scotians to learn about and celebrate the rich and vibrant history of Black communities in this province and the great contributions they've made. The Maroons and the Black Loyalists, the Prestons, Africville and the Creighton Avenue Extension, Viola Desmond, the Nova Scotia Project and the Black United Front, the South End Environmental and Justice Society, and on and on. While we need to do this work all year round, February is also a time when we should refocus our attention to learning about the anti-Black racism that has existed for as long as people of African descent have lived here in Nova Scotia. Collectively, we must do more, and there is much to do. We must address the racial profiling and discrimination Black people in this province face every day while shopping, driving, taking the bus, walking, going to school, simply living their lives. Those of us who occupy positions of power, all of us in this House, have to do the work to make our society more equitable and just for everyone. Thank you.
The honourable member for Guysborough Eastern Shore Tracadie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in recognition of the Tracadie United Baptist Ladies Auxiliary for their hard work in support of their community and communities in developing countries. The ladies prepared their annual shoe boxes for boys and girls in developing countries to make sure they have a good Christmas, an activity they do every year. They also did door-to-door house collection for their annual food box that they normally have in the church, getting donations for the local food bank. Finally, they completed their 5th year of their annual Christmas Tree Light Memorial fundraiser, remembering members of the community who had been lost in the previous year. The Ladies Auxiliary also welcomed their newest member, Cindy Williams, noted to be an asset and a blessing in keeping their organization numbers up and helping them do their important work. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask everyone to join me in giving the Tracadie United Baptist Auxiliary, members of one of the oldest African Nova Scotia churches in the province, a round of applause for their service to their community and communities abroad and for their dedication to service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this month I had the opportunity to tour the Kentville Food Bank. I was simply amazed at the level of organization and effort the volunteers put in to provide food to an average of 50 families per week. The food bank is at St. Joseph's Church on Belcher Street and has one of the largest territories of any food bank in our province. The average family will receive 70 pounds of food, which they choose from a pick sheet list. Food Bank Chair Harvey Gilmore is very grateful for the number of volunteers and the support of local farmers and stores. Even if they don't fundraise, they always have enough money to provide food with many unsolicited cash donations. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Gilmore and the many volunteers at the Kentville Food Bank for their time and generosity. Thank you, Mr.
Speaker. The honourable member for Halifax Armdale.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to share the good news that the Canadian Lebanon Society of Halifax's Lebanese Heritage School has been selected by the Department of Education as an approved course provider for Lebanese Arabic 10 and 11, 2 new personal development credit options for high school students. These full credit courses will allow our young people to learn our beautiful Lebanese Arabic language while fulfilling their standard course requirements. Our students have many great opportunities to learn, both inside our classrooms and outside, and I'm proud our province recognizes the value of those opportunities. The classes will count towards one of their 5 electives and will be available to students come this fall. I want to congratulate the Canadian Lebanon Society, the instructors of the Lebanese Heritage Language School, the Honorary Consulate of Lebanon in Halifax for their collaboration on bringing this to fruition. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure to rise today to speak about Mrs. Kelsey Han, a young resident of Pictou West. Kelsey has been making a name for herself in the professional sporting world of go-karting. Although just 17 years of age, Kelsey is an experienced racer and is a 10-year veteran of the sport. She has competed in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Ontario, and Quebec. She has also ventured across the border to the United States to compete in Florida and Indiana. A documentary produced by a Toronto-based production company entitled "Winning is a Close Second" tells the story of Kelsey's go-karting career. The documentary was shown at the DeCoste Entertainment Centre, Pictou, in January 2020. Mr. Speaker, I extend my admiration to Kelsey for her determination to follow her passion in a male-dominated sport. I wish Kelsey much success in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Antigonish on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to direct the member's attention to the East Gallery, where I'd like to recognize a constituent of mine and ask him to rise. So Moses Cody, Mr. Speaker. He's an active member of the community in Antigonish and obviously very engaged in the political process as well. So he's here to observe the opening of the legislative session sitting, Mr. Speaker. So if we could give him the warm welcome of the House, that'd be appreciated.
The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I recognize Dr. Harris Crooks. Dr. Crooks graduated from Dalhousie Medical School in 1976 at the top of his class. He immediately hung up his shingle in his home community, setting us general practice in a small office in Prospect Bay. Since then, he has worked tirelessly to serve his patients with great skill and care. His dedication goes above and beyond expectations. As an avid fisherman from a long-standing fishing family, he would rise early in the morning and fish until midday, clean up at home, then work at the office, seeing patients until late into the night, only to get up and repeat it all over again the next day. As an old-school physician, he would frequently make host calls to those unable to travel, and it was not uncommon for patients to knock on his door at all hours of the day and night. He has been a wealth of knowledge to his colleagues at Hatchet Lake Medical Clinic and has been instrumental in mentoring all those practicing at the clinic. Dr. Crooks retired in December of 2019, and his dry wit and hearty laugh is missed by all. Mr. Speaker, I'd like the members of the House to join me in thanking Dr. Crooks for his admirable work, his outstanding service, and skillful care to his patients and the community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Queens Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in Queens County. The people I grew up with, the people I still count among my friends, rely on the forestry industry for their livelihoods. The people in my constituency love the forest, and they take immense pride in caring for it. Mr. Speaker, it has been difficult to watch people you care about in your community be consumed with emotional and financial panic because of a government decision. As MLAs, we have a responsibility to understand that when we make decisions, we have a large impact on the lives of the people we represent. We also have a responsibility to be accountable for those decisions. I will continue to be a positive voice for the hardworking people who work in our forests, and I urge all MLAs to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sydney Whitney Pier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Special Olympics in Cape Breton. This year, Cape Breton is sending a record 17 athletes to Thunder Bay to compete in the coming weeks in the National Games. Mr. Speaker, this speaks volumes to the programming that we have on the island, and a number of volunteer organizations and families are involved with ensuring that the Special Olympics are a success in Cape Breton. To recognize a few, the Cape Breton Regional Police, the local Knights of Columbus, Special Olympics Cape Breton, and all of their families. It's a monumental time for that organization to be sending that many athletes to Thunder Bay. For some of those athletes, it's their first time to compete, and for some others, it's their first time going on a plane. So it's a very exciting time for them and their families. So I ask all members of the House to congratulate all of the athletes, whether they're from Cape Breton or across the province, as they go to compete in Thunder Bay later this month.
The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thousands of Nova Scotians who rely on our forest for their livelihood are going through a very difficult time in transitioning right now. The worry and anxiety they feel is not due to anything they have done. It is because of a government decision. Mr. Speaker, those jobs matter. Those hardworking men and women, foresters, mill workers, service industry workers, fishers, fuel suppliers, and so on. They expect a plan for jobs and expect a plan for our economy, and that's what they deserve. They want answers, and they want confidence that their government is not going to abandon them at this time of uncertainty. As this session of the legislature begins, I hope we can all work for these men and women and keep them in our minds as we make positive decisions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently, volunteers at Beaverbank Community Garden has partnered with Be a Honey with Heart and our community market to start a new beehive program. The Be a Youth Executive Committee is open to youth between the ages of 12 and 17 to learn about building a social enterprise. Beekeeping by the youth will include conducting hive checks as well as bottling and marketing the honey harvested from the start to finish. The youth will learn as they assist in the garden as well as to build a social enterprise in the community. Mr. Speaker, I request all members of the legislature to join me in wishing good luck to all the participants of this program, and you can look for their honey at the Halifax Seaport Market. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to make an introduction.
Permission granted.
Mr. Speaker, I draw all members of the House to the opposite side of the gallery where Dr. Lisa Bonang is here, and I ask her to rise, and as well as Patricia Ockney, who is the PC candidate of record for the Eastern Shore, and her father, Doug Bacon, who is a mentor of mine, as well as her grandfather, who was Premier Roger Bacon. I ask all members of the legislature to join me in welcoming them to the House.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to acknowledge the 3,138 members of the Facebook group Save Little Harbour Owl's Head from Corrupt Backroom Deal. These are members of the community who decided that they were going to make sure that government heard their voices. I also want to quote the Cole Harbour Parks and Trails Association, who wrote recently, "The apparent process and lack of public consultation up front has the Cole Harbour Parks and Trails Association concerned that similar actions could be taken with the areas that we manage for the people of Nova Scotia through the Department of Lands and Forest." After that deliberation, the Cole Harbour Board unanimously passed the following motion: that the Board endorse and distribute the following position statement on the Owl's Head protected area: that the provincial decision to remove the Owl's Head area of Eastern Shore from the list of potential protected areas and parks should be reversed until a more thorough public consultation is carried out. Mr. Speaker, I recognize all of these constituents for speaking out publicly. Thank you.
The honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take the opportunity to recognize members of the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Development Association and a group of youth who, in partnership with the Emmanuel Baptist Church in Upper Hammonds Plains, are in the process of organizing a trip to Washington, D.C. The Upper Hammonds Plains Community Development Association has been established for over 5 decades, Mr. Speaker, and have continually enabled opportunities for young people and community members to recognize the local history, African Nova Scotian history, and African history more globally. This summer, they'll be partaking in a trip to Washington, D.C., where they'll visit sites such as the Museum of African American History and the Martin Luther King Jr. Monument. And Mr. Speaker, I ask all members of the House to aid me in wishing them well. Thank you.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the English Snowmobile Society has been given funding from the Mary Ross Barker Trust Fund to purchase a new trail groomer. Local riders will be able to leave from Ingonish and connect with the other trails across the island. This trail, along with the multi-use overpass in Bedeck, ties in with the overall plan to start promoting Cape Breton as a four-season tourism destination. The formation of the ISS wouldn't have been possible without the cooperation of the new owners of Ski Cape Smoky, since the snowmobile trail comes out at the top of the mountain and they'll be using the new access road built by the ski hill. I ask all members to join me in congratulating and thanking Stan and Jenny Symes and the English Snowmobile Society for bringing their ideas to fruition. It is indeed a promising future for Ingonish, north of Smoky, and all of Cape Breton Island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to congratulate the trustees of Church Memorial Park in Chester, who held a celebration this past Heritage Day, February 17th, for community members to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Eleanor Pugh Morris Memorial Arena. And I was honored to be part of these celebrations. Church Memorial Park is home not only to the skating arena and the Chester Curling Club, but also to the Chester Tennis Club, the Chester Brass Band, and the Chester Family Resource Centre. The volunteer trustees of the park have projects planned to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the arena, all aligned to goals to promote healthy living, wellness, and quality of life for residents of the municipality and surrounding communities. Mr. Speaker, I invite the members of this House of Assembly to join me in congratulating the trustees of the Church Memorial Park. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sydney River, Myra Lewisburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to congratulate the Kids Club from Riverside Elementary School in Albert Bridge on their donation to our constituency's first annual Newborns in Need fundraiser. The K-Kids consist of grade 4 and 5 students who expressed an interest in extending their leadership in the community and helping others. They commit to 3 projects a year to help their community or school under the guidance of their school advisors. In December, the groups initiated Ugly Christmas Sweater Day, where the students were invited to wear an ugly sweater and bring a donation to the Newborns in Need. Their donation totaled $350, as well as newborn clothing. It is a pleasure to recognize and congratulate this amazing group of children on their hard work and commitment to making their community and school a better place. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize the outstanding work of Tara Kinch of Shabukto Connections. Tara is a community support worker, and she helps members of the community connect to services they need. Tara often deals with people that are overwhelmed by their circumstances and do not know where to turn. When they reach out to Tara, they know that they will be welcomed and not judged. She works extremely hard to connect them to resources available in the community. Tara has built a network of connections that help her assist people in need. She's always willing to advocate on behalf of her clients, and she has successfully helped many of those members of the community improve their lives. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank Tara for all her hard work and dedication to improving the lives of members in our community. She's a very difficult and demanding job, but she does it with compassion and commitment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to thank the members of the organizing team of this year's Sackville Sandwich Week. Sackville Sandwich Week takes place from March 7th to 14th. Anyone interested can participate in this fundraising celebration by visiting participating Sackville restaurants and testing out their featured sandwiches. There will also be an opportunity for participants to enter to win some very exciting prizes. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask all members of this House of Assembly to join me in thanking the organizing team of the Sackville Sandwich Week for hosting this event and for supporting the Sackville Public Library's community cooking program by donating a monetary portion of every sandwich sold during this week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much for those member statements. We'll just await the arrival of question period in a few seconds.
The arrival.
We'll now move on to oral questions put by members to ministers. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Bernie Miller is a close confidant of the Premier's. He's a senior advisor to the Premier. In fact, his job description says Mr. Miller has been a key advisor in the establishment of province's key priorities. It goes on to list a number of responsibilities that Mr. Miller was under his purview, and his compensation at the time was $15,000 a month. So it's certainly from the contract and the wording, it seems like this is somebody that the Premier trusted and relied on. I'd like to ask the Premier, would the Premier agree that Mr. Miller is someone that he respects and trusts as an advisor?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I would tell the Honourable Member Mr. Miller is highly regarded and respected, Mr. Speaker, not only by me, Mr. Speaker, but by many Nova Scotians for the continuing work that he's made as a professional, Mr. Speaker, in this province and building a law firm as the lead partner for a very long time, and someone, Mr. Speaker, now wants to give back to his province, and we're grateful that many men and women like Mr. Miller have chosen, Mr. Speaker, after a long career to come back and provide good counsel, quite frankly, and good support to the people of this province.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, in a scrum in November 2015, the Premier said that everyone knows when either the Premier's Chief of Staff or anyone close to him speaks, they speak on his behalf, and I think that's important to acknowledge. So in some email correspondence in respect of the Alec Cameron case, email correspondence, the Deputy Minister of the Department of Justice sent an email to Alec Cameron dated November 13, 2016, and the Deputy referred for Alex Cameron to reach out to either the Deputy or Mr. Miller to review instructions for the Alton gas case before going to court that week. In that email, the Deputy suggested that Mr. Cameron not advance a certain particular argument. However, in a subsequent email that evening, Mr. Miller reached out to Mr. Cameron and indicated that he did not agree with the Deputy's instructions. And I'd like to ask the Premier, is it true that Mr. Miller was the Premier's liaison on the Alton gas file in respect of Alec Cameron's argument?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The matter the Honourable Member is referring to is before the courts, Mr. Speaker, but let me be clear. I did not give Mr. Cameron or Mr. Miller instructions, Mr. Speaker, and let me be clear, there will be a defence filed in the court, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the court proceedings were decided this morning when the Supreme Court of Canada said there's nothing to hear. There is nothing before the courts at the moment that would preclude the Premier, as much as he might hope, from answering some questions on the matter. I'd like to ask the Premier, if Mr. Miller wasn't his liaison in this file, wouldn't it be fair to assume that either the Chief of Staff or his direct deputy were the liaisons? In an email dated November 13th from Mr. Miller to Mr. Cameron, Mr. Miller indicated that he would be speaking with the Premier's senior staff to discuss instructions. I can table that email for the House. Mr. Miller later confirmed that this discussion had taken place. He included that in Mr. Miller's affidavit, and he was told that he should speak, that when Mr. Cameron was seeking instructions, he should speak directly to Mr. Miller. I'd like to ask the Premier, can the Premier confirm if he spoke to Mr. Miller on November 14th regarding instructions that were to be given to Alex Cameron in the case of the Alton gas file?
The Honourable Premier.
Speaker, I said from the very beginning, Mr. Speaker, the province has the responsibility and duty to consult, Mr. Speaker, and I've said we've met our obligations when it came to the issue of Alton gas, Mr. Speaker. That was the defence, and Mr. Speaker, there will be a defence filed in the court.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in our constituency offices, we are experiencing a steady escalation of people whose lives are really being turned upside down by sudden and often very dramatic increases in their rent, amounting to the hundreds of dollars. We know that these are, in many cases, increases that people can't afford to pay, and that this is a reflection of a vacancy rate that in this city has shrunk to a microscopic, now 1%. And we also know that when this same situation was being faced by other provinces in BC or Ontario or Quebec and in PEI, they brought in rent control. So I want to ask the Premier, will he share his reasoning about why, in his view, the people of Nova Scotia don't deserve the same rent control protections as people in BC, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and PEI?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for raising this all-important issue. He is very passionate. I want to give him, Mr. Speaker, his due, continuing to make sure that this issue hits the floor of the legislature, so we continue to debate and discuss it. As he knows, we've made some investments in rent subs supporting, Mr. Speaker, affordable housing. We'll have more to say about that in the coming weeks, Mr. Speaker. I want to assure the honourable member it is a concern to all members of this House that this growing economy, particularly here in HRM, but not specifically just to HRM, but the growing economy has certainly put pressure, Mr. Speaker, on families when it comes to affordability around housing, and we will continue to work with him. But at no point have we seen the public policy position that the honourable member taken that actually drives the results that we would hope they would.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Mr. Speaker, there is zero evidence that rent supplements are an effective affordable housing mechanism in a situation of a vacancy rate like we have at the moment here, which is lower than that in Toronto or in Vancouver. And this has made looking for an apartment in this city practically into the same thing as having another job. Night after night, people spend hours and hours searching for vacancies, applying to vacancies, and then lining up with great groups of people who are making applications, and hoping they might be the one person selected for the unit that's come up. This is the definition, Mr. Speaker, of an imbalanced market. And when markets get imbalanced in this kind of way, it's the government's responsibility to restore that balance. So I want to ask the Premier, can he explain his reluctance to bring balance to the rental market in Nova Scotia through regulation?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I disagree with the premise of that question. Mr. Speaker, we've continued to make investments in affordable housing, Mr. Speaker, and the honourable member would know there are a myriad of options when it comes to housing. We have people, Mr. Speaker, that require support overnight to be supported. How do we do that with our shelters across the province? How do we ensure that new homeowners get a chance to come into the rental marketplace, Mr. Speaker, first-time home buyers? Investments that we've made, he's very right. Rents in the region have increased substantially, Mr. Speaker. That's why we brought in the rent subs. He disagrees with that public policy, and I appreciate his position and where he stands. And we need to continue to make sure that we provide more housing options for Nova Scotia families and individuals here in HRM, but indeed across the province.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Mr. Speaker, I contend that the Premier is not facing the severity of the basic numbers. The average rent for a two-bedroom apartment in Nova Scotia went up 3.5% last year. The average rent for a three-bedroom apartment went up 4.7%. For a one-bedroom, 4%. And in the same period, the Consumer Price Index in Nova Scotia only went up by 1%. So I want to ask the Premier, does his government have any intention of doing anything whatsoever to protect the people of the province from rent increases that are triple, quadruple, and practically quintuple the increases we're seeing in the CPI?
The Honourable Premier.
Yes.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On November 14th, 2016, the Premier had a conversation with Mr. Miller and told him that it was okay to instruct Mr. Cameron to advance a particular argument. In fact, Mr. Miller wrote an email to Mr. Cameron, I can table his affidavit, and that where it clearly says the position raised in the brief may be advanced. Aside from the email, Mr. Miller also called Mr. Cameron at the same time to confirm the instructions, and Mr. Miller confirmed to Mr. Cameron that that he should not abandon the argument. And Mr. Cameron was told by Mr. Miller that these instructions to not abandon the argument came from a very tall gentleman. I'd like to ask the Premier, can the Premier confirm that he is in fact the very tall gentleman that had been speaking with Mr. Miller that morning?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, again, Mr. Speaker, I want want to thank the honourable member for the question. This is before the court, Mr. Speaker, and I want to assure the honourable member there will be we will file, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Miller will file the defence. He has one side of this story, Mr. Speaker, and it works for him politically, but the reality is, Mr. Speaker, in the justice system, they'll hear both sides.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, both sides of this story are available to every Nova Scotian. The documents were released just a few hours ago, Mr. Speaker, when the Supreme Court of Canada ruled for the third time in favour of Mr. Cameron. We will find out, I'm sure, at which cost the Premier has tried to cover up his instructions in the fullness of time. But at paragraph 39 of Mr. Miller's affidavit, he actually confirms that the Premier is the very tall gentleman from whom he obtained the instructions. So the Premier's most senior staff had set up a call between Mr. Miller and the Premier, and Mr. Miller confirmed that he spoke to the Premier when he was telling Mr. Cameron not to abandon the argument. Yet on November 17th, the Premier told the media he had no idea it was being put forward. That's just 3 days later. I'd like to ask the Premier, can he confirm what happened between November 14th and giving the instructions and November 17th when he tried to cover up the instructions?
Order, please. The term cover up is an unparliamentary term, so I just want to put that on the record. The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member, if he actually knew what he was referring to, Mr. Speaker, that brief was filed in the court in June. He's quoting to November. The former member of the New Democratic Party asked me a question in the House of Assembly about the very issue, Mr. Speaker. At that moment in time, I had no idea what she was referring to. That is exactly what I said, Mr. Speaker, and I've been very clear from the very beginning. We have a duty to consult with the Mi'kmaq of this province, and we believe we've met that obligation when it came to this particular thing. That's what I've said, Mr. Speaker. That's what I will continue to say.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
And yet, on November 14th, the Premier instructed his agent, Mr. Miller, to tell Mr. Cameron to proceed with the argument that was laid out in the brief that had been sitting in his department for 3 months and was well known to everyone in the department. On November 14th, when the Premier spoke to Mr. Miller, he would have been aware of the arguments being put forward by Mr. Cameron. And this was confirmed in a sworn statement by Mr. Miller. In fact, Mr. Cameron, when Mr. Cameron went to court on November 14th and 15th and advanced these arguments, it was without a doubt in the eyes of 3 courts with the knowledge of the Premier. But yet, following the backlash, the Premier made comments to the media that he knew nothing about this situation. And the same afternoon, Mr. Miller and Mr. Cameron spoke on the phone, and Mr. Miller advised Cameron that the Premier was having a bad week and he would come around to acknowledging what had obviously happened. I'd like to ask the Premier, was it a bad week, and has he come around and is willing to acknowledge what actually happened?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I often wonder where the honourable member draws lines from dot to dot and jumps all over the place, Mr. Speaker. It works for him politically, Mr. Speaker, but the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, I'll stand on my integrity. Mr. Speaker, my word matters to me. I've continued to make there's no way that I'm going to go out and mislead, quite frankly, the press or anyone in this House, or quite frankly, anyone on this file, or quite frankly, any other file. The reality of it is, one of the members from the Democratic Party raised the question in November. I think it was November 10th, I believe, 9th, day before my birthday, raised the question. I had no idea, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to know what they were referring to. The fact of the matter is, I've continued to say on this entire case, we have a duty to consult, and we met that obligation when it came to Alton Gas. That was our defence, Mr. Speaker. That continues to be our defence. The courts will determine it.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was November 9th when the member of the NDP raised the issue in the House. And on November 10th, the Premier did say he was unaware of it. But what we're talking about is November 14th. The day this went to court, and a conversation that he had on November 13th with his agent, which no doubt is after November 9th, and the Premier certainly knew the argument that was going to be raised at that time. I'd like to ask the Premier, once he was made aware on November 9th of the substance of the argument that was on his desk for 3 months already, why did he instruct Mr. Miller on the 14th of November to tell Mr. Cameron to proceed with the case as filed in the briefs when he knew exactly what was happening for at least 3 days at that point?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I did not tell Mr. Miller or Mr. Cameron, Mr. Speaker. What I've continued to say, Mr. Speaker, we have a duty to consult. Our government believes in that process, Mr. Speaker, but we also believe, Mr. Speaker, when we've met that obligation, we have a responsibility to the entire province to move forward on important projects. We've met that duty, Mr. Speaker, to consult. In our view, the courts will determine whether they agree.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And after the argument that the Premier agreed to was indeed advanced on November 14th and 15th, on November 17th, the Premier told the media that he was furious that the argument was being advanced. But on November 14th, he was quite accepting of it and blessed the argument to proceed. So I'd like to ask the Premier which statement is more accurate. Was he furious on November 17th as a result of the media's backlash, or was he happy with the argument on November 14th when he told his agent to proceed as directed?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, again, Mr. Speaker, I can't, Mr. Speaker, confirm with the Honourable Member when his statements are accurate, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of fact, you ruled at times they're not. The reality of it is, Mr. Speaker, I stand behind the positions that I've taken, that our government taken, Mr. Speaker. I've said from the very beginning we have a duty to consult, Mr. Speaker, and we've met that obligation.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. The short-term rental market in this province is officially out of control. Short-term rentals have removed 740 housing units from Halifax's long-term housing market. Adding to this, Halifax's short-term rental market is dominated by entire home listings, 61% of which are suitable for families with 2 or more bedrooms. It is unacceptable that in the midst of a housing crisis, this government has waited so long to act. Mr. Speaker, will the Premier admit that this situation has been left to spiral out of control?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable for the question. We've continued, Mr. Speaker, to provide rent subs across the province, across this region, Mr. Speaker. We've supported with young families through first-time home buyers program. We're pleased to see a number have purchased that, Mr. Speaker. Continue to invest, Mr. Speaker, in our shelters across the province, provide support. We'll continue to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that we provide affordable housing not only in the capital region but in and around the area, Mr. Speaker, and we'll work with our external partners to ensure that we continue to grow the housing stock to meet the needs of our citizens.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, rent supplements do not replace units that have disappeared from the market. We have finally received a glimpse into the Liberals' plan for regulating the short-term rental market, and the results are profoundly disappointing. There is no plan to require that all units are registered, and no ability for municipalities to halt the proliferation of short-term rentals. A full-time commercial short-term rental with over 5 bedrooms will only have to pay $150 a year, and lucrative platforms like Airbnb, $500 a year. The plan is weak, and it won't contribute nearly enough revenue that could be invested to build affordable housing in the midst of a housing crisis. Mr. Speaker, does the Premier have any interest in curbing the significant impact of lucrative commercial short-term rentals on this province's housing market?
The Honourable Premier.
Speaker, I'll ask the Minister of Business to respond.
The Honourable Minister of Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, we're certainly aware of the impact of the sharing economy, the short-term housing, short-term rental market, and how it's impacted not only the province but certainly specifically here to Halifax and the HRM region. Look, there was no supports, there was no recordings, there was no track, no control whatsoever of the short-term housing market, how it was impacting the housing stock here for all Nova Scotians. Our registration system will do that. It certainly will, Mr. Speaker. I fundamentally disagree with the NDP's position on this. It's not $150 for their participation. It's $150 for their registration. They still have to pay taxes. They still have to do all the other things now that our traditional tourist accommodation operators have to do. So without question, we've leveled the playing field, but this system will give us the data so we can address the very issue that the member's bringing up. Thanks.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to table a sworn affidavit before the courts. It was accepted by the courts and relied upon in the judges in their 3 decisions where they found in favor of Mr. Cameron. In paragraph 51 of the affidavit, it says, on Saturday, November 19th, just for orientation, we're talking about a week after this blew up on the Premier, after he gave the instruction and then tried to back away from it. On November 19th, I spoke to Mr. Miller by telephone. Mr. Miller suggested to me that the government needed a scapegoat, but that he didn't think it would be me. I'd like to ask the Premier, what might Mr. Miller have been insinuating when he suggested the government needed a scapegoat on this one?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, again, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Miller will respond to the accusations that are against Mr. Miller. Mr. Speaker, the reality of it is, the fact of the matter is, defence was we have a duty to consult, and we believe we've met that obligation.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That didn't take long, 20 minutes, and the Premier's backing away from Mr. Miller in a hurry. But I'd like to ask the Premier. When Mr. Miller referred to the government needing a scapegoat, was the Premier the one who gave Mr. Miller the instruction to make Mr. Cameron the scapegoat for the government on this file?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, he's drawing a long bow, Mr. Speaker. The reality of it is, Mr. Speaker, we continue to provide defence. We have a duty to consult. We believe we've met that obligation, Mr. Speaker. The courts will determine whether we have.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The line's not that long, Mr. Speaker. 3 courts have now made the same finding, and the Premier might not respect the judgments of the 3 courts, but the reality is the reality. Mr. Cameron's brief was submitted to the Office of Aboriginal Affairs, a department over which the Premier presides, on July 20th, 2017. The brief included the argument at issue. A meeting of the Department of Aboriginal Affairs and the Department of Justice was held with Mr. Cameron on July 25th to discuss instructions, and a final brief was submitted to the court on August 2nd that included the arguments that had been agreed and the instructions Mr. Cameron had been given. So the instructions Mr. Cameron acted upon came from the Premier's department and were provided to Mr. Cameron, and then the brief was produced and included in this argument and filed with the court. I'd like to ask the Premier, as Minister of the Department of Aboriginal Affairs, who gave the instructions, was the Premier actively involved in providing those instructions to Mr. Cameron?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, his statement is inaccurate, Mr. Speaker, and the reality of it is this process before the court, and we'll follow defence.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we've consulted with the legal experts involved in this case. The Supreme Court ruled this morning. It's dismissed. The Premier's final appeal was dismissed. There is nothing before the courts, and unless the Premier can produce otherwise, he's going to have to answer the questions on the floor of this House. So if the Premier didn't provide the instructions, given that he is the Minister of the department that did, if it's not the Minister that provides instructions on such a significant, important case, who is it?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the Department of Aboriginal Affairs wasn't the client. He should find out who the client was before Mr. Speaker starts making accusations. The reality of it is he should do a little bit more homework.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Here's the reality, Mr. Speaker, is the Premier has been in the media as a defender of privilege. And now 3 times he's gone to court to try and silence Mr. Cameron. 3 times. Nova Scotia Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and 3 times courts have determined that it's the Premier who broke the privilege. The defender of privilege has now been isolated and exposed by 3 courts as the breaker of privilege. I'd like to ask the Premier, Ontario lawyers working on this case, I think 4 of them on this file, for a number of years. I'd like to ask the Premier, how much taxpayer money did he spend trying to keep accurate information from Nova Scotians on what the Premier actually knew was in the files? He knew what he instructed Mr. Cameron to do, and he used taxpayer money to try and hide it from them. I want to know how much.
The Honourable Premier.
Speaker, the matters before the court, Mr. Speaker, will continue to apply defence, Mr. Speaker, and we'll ensure, Mr. Speaker, all the facts will be heard by all Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, in due time.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if the Premier has initiated some legal action in the last few minutes, but there is no action before the courts. These are the documents from the courts. Affidavits from Mr. Cameron. Affidavits from Deputy Miller, the Premier's close confidant. Affidavits from Deputy Ministers. Finding of judges. These are the facts, and I'd be happy to walk the Premier through the legal course he's been on for 3 years with taxpayer money if he is interested in it. But the reality is that the courts have decided, and despite the Premier's assertions here today and in the media, despite his assertions that he was unaware, the affidavits of 2 officers of the court, Mr. Cameron and Mr. Miller, confirmed that he was well aware of these arguments, that he was in agreement with these arguments, and that he knew the instructions were very clear to his client. I'd like to ask the Premier today if he can be more truthful on the instructions that he actually...
I'd like to remind the Honourable Leader of the official opposition to insinuate that any member of this House is not being truthful in this chamber is unparliamentary, and I'll get you to retract that statement, please.
I'll retract the word truthful. And I'm optimistic that the Premier can be more accurate on the events that actually played out leading up to November 14th. And I would like to ask the Premier again, if he's willing to tell Nova Scotians, tell members of this House, how much taxpayer money he invested in this little charade he's had.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as this matter is continued before the court, Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to follow the process that is provided to all Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. And when the process, we'll make sure that both sides of the story are communicated to the court. They will make a decision, Mr. Speaker, and we will follow the court.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, at 10:45 this morning, the Supreme Court of Canada dismissed the Premier's actions. That's the 3rd time that a court has ruled in favour of Mr. Cameron, said Mr. Cameron has the ability to defend his reputation in the face of somebody who was willing to break privilege and try and smear his reputation. 3 times. At 10:45 this morning, the Supreme Court dismissed the final appeal. The Premier has indicated this is before the courts. I'd like the Premier to inform this House which action is before the House.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as Mr. Cameron has the right to defend his reputation, so does Mr. Miller.
The Honourable Leader. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. People in my constituency, including seniors and single mothers, are being evicted either to make way for renovations or because they simply cannot pay the rent hikes that are becoming commonplace. Some people are being placed in hotels paid for by the Department of Community Services. Some head to emergency shelters. Some, I'm sure, resort to unsafe situations. And frankly, there are some who I just don't know what happens to because, Mr. Speaker, there is simply no place for them to go. Mr. Speaker, can the Premier please provide evidence to the House that this government's housing plans are having a positive impact in Dartmouth North?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable for the question. Tell her we continue to provide rent subs not only in Dartmouth North but across the region, Mr. Speaker. We continue to invest in housing, both our own stock, Mr. Speaker, and ensuring that there's affordable housing in the private market. But I want to tell the Honourable Member we know there's more work to do, Mr. Speaker. We're feeling, as I've said many times, the growth of this economy, Mr. Speaker, has taken a lot of people with it, but it has left some people behind. And that is the reality, and we're going to work towards providing public policy that actually drives the results that we're hoping for, Mr. Speaker, that leaves more money in the pockets of low-income Nova Scotians, ensuring that we can provide them support when it comes to housing, the myriad of options when it comes to providing those supports for living with, Mr. Speaker, and at the same time ensuring, as the Honourable Member known, her leader talked about, the child poverty rate in this province is far too high, Mr. Speaker. We need to continue to work to ensure that as we as a province continue to have record growth in this economy, that we begin to make sure that we share it with those who need it the most.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Mr. Speaker, public policies like rent supplements, we know, are not working in an environment where there's no place to live. And public policies like the standard household rate change at Department of Community Services also doesn't work because it's not enough money. We also know that the waiting list for public housing has not budged in years, Mr. Speaker. When people facing eviction come into my office, it is heartbreaking for them to be told to get in line behind thousands of others waiting for housing. In November November of last year, the wait list was at the highest number in 4 years, at 5,316 households. That's including 1,639 families and 2,546 seniors. Mr. Speaker, can the Premier please explain why the number of Nova Scotians on the wait list for housing has barely budged during his time in office?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, last year 2,500 people came off that list, Mr. Speaker. The reality of it is we know there's more work to do, but there's one thing for certain that we've seen across the region, Mr. Speaker, that rent control doesn't work. That's the reality. The solution they're providing doesn't fix the problem. It's a good slogan. It actually fits on the pamphlet well. It misleads and represents what's actually the reality of what's going to happen for those families, Mr. Speaker. The reality of it is we need to continue to work with the private sector to provide opportunities. We as a government need to continue to invest in our own housing stock. And we need to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that Nova Scotians have the ability to move into their own properties, Mr. Speaker. That's why we continue to make those investments.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's been 2 months today. 2 months since the Premier decided there'd be no extension to Boat Harbour. 2 months since the Premier forced the closure of Northern Pulp. On May 5th, and let's be accurate, May 5th will be the 5-year mark since legislature was passed. And to anticipate the failed forestry industry, what's going on now, to mitigate the situation, we find ourselves in forestry today. My question for the Premier, does the upcoming budget have it reflect the $2 billion deficit that the Nova Scotia economy could see because of the Northern Pulp closure?
The Honourable Premier.
Speaker, thank the Honourable for the question. We'll continue to work with the forestry sector, Mr. Speaker, as we transition, Mr. Speaker, to a new future. The Leahy report has laid out a 10-year plan. The closure of Northern Pulp, with closure of Boat Harbour, Mr. Speaker, has created a situation where we need to deal with the issues of chips, low-value fibre, that we're looking for opportunities to how to best use that. The transition team is working very hard, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we provide new opportunities, new markets. As the honourable member would know, there was a trust just set up that had $50 million in it. That's on top of the money that had already committed to silviculture and road building, and we will continue to work, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we see a brighter future. I believe there is a future in this province for the forestry sector. The reality of it is, Mr. Speaker, all members in this House supported the fact of closing Boat Harbour on January 30th, 2020, and nobody stood up in this House and said leave it open.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland South.
Mr. Speaker, livelihoods of hard-working forest families and related services are being affected on an hourly basis right now, not daily, not weekly, not monthly. In a letter sent to our PC leader in February 13th, the Premier promised to provide clarity in the House on questions we received from the forestry sector, passed on through the transition team through the Premier. At that time, the Premier said he would provide clarity on the floor of the legislature, but refused to carry on any further conversations on questions, whether they be answered or not. Again, I'll ask my question. Does the budget have any reference on the $2 billion hole that we may see in the economy due to the Northern Pulp closure?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, in the end of his question, he said we may. It's another big leap, Mr. Speaker. We know there are challenges in the sector. It's why we continue to invest in innovation rebate, Mr. Speaker, to have the private sector continue to invest where government will support to add values to those chips, Mr. Speaker, that are in sawmills across this province. It's why we continue to look, how do we find value in the low-value fibre that's in the forest sector, Mr. Speaker, that has been part of the private sector woodlot owners' business plan when it came to ensuring the saw logs that they were taking going into the mill. All of those, Mr. Speaker, are connected to the investments that we've continued to make, providing supports when it comes to training, Mr. Speaker. It's why we continue to provide line of credit for those who want to look for a transition, or how do they reposition their equipment to deal with the new realities in the forest sector. All those, Mr. Speaker, are an important part of how we continue to have a forest sector in our province. And I want to tell the honourable member, I understand the challenges that people are facing, the anxiety they're feeling. I want to thank his colleague from Cumberland North, who has been constructive. How do we go out and talk and provide supports back into the transition community? That's the important stuff that's required to allow the transition team, who represents the sector, Mr. Speaker, to continue to make their strategic investments, and we will.
The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Premier for leading into the question and the comments about my colleague, that my colleague and I both sit in that transition team locally in Cumberland County and are coming up with ideas and sending correspondence on a regular basis to the transition team. So my question would be to the Premier, as he is responsible for the minister that chairs that transition team, when can that community expect a response back and a visit from the chairperson as requested?
The Honourable Premier.
Speaker, I'm not exactly sure that the schedule of the transition team, Mr. Speaker, but the reality of it is some of the recommendations that have been brought in have been part of the discussion and part of the implementation that's gone out. They'll continue to work with that, and the transitional team will continue to set their own agenda when it comes to ensuring that the sector, which is represented, Mr. Speaker, on that transition team, will continue to respond to the needs and how do we best position this sector for a new future.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the terms of reference for that transition team was to have an immediate response for immediate action for the forestry sector. Some of those have been announced from the transition team's accomplishments. One of the things that the sector heard and were very worried about last week was when the transition funds were going to be put into trust. Sometimes when you hear trust, one of the terms of reference was immediate action. The sector believes that the immediate action, the transition team and the government may believe that the immediate actions are already taken care of. Again, is there any money in the funds for the budget, and does the government currently believe that the immediate actions are done for this transition team, and now they're looking at long-range forecasts?
The Honourable Premier.
Not at all, Mr. Speaker. The reality of it is that trust was set up to protect that fund, Mr. Speaker, for the forest sector, which will go to the transition team. It was there to be set up to ensure that at the end of the fiscal year that money would still be there to access the issues and challenges that are being faced by communities across this province. And it's not just, quite frankly, in the community of Pictou, where we've had issues where the mill was. We're seeing it in Queens County, one of the largest employers. We see it in different parts of the province. In your particular part of the province, people working in the woods, the woodlot owners. We see that. We know the value has been reduced in the private woodlot owners. What we need to continue is move ourselves to a new transition. How do we add value to the low-end product that we have in some cases as we continue to provide and protect that exclusion from our softwood lumber exclusion, to make sure that we continue to have private woodlot owners are getting top value for the saw logs that are coming off their woodlots as we provide new markets for that low-value product. We know that transition has been difficult. We're working to make that happen, and we believe that equity that has been lost, Mr. Speaker, will be regained as we move ourselves to a brighter future.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton-Richmond.
According to the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, Mr. Speaker, up to 80% of premature heart disease and stroke can be prevented, saving lives and millions of dollars in healthcare spending. The NSHA document finding a primary care provider in Nova Scotia, January 2020, reports nearly 47,000 Nova Scotians are still without a family doctor, and this includes just shy of 4,600 people in the Eastern Zone and 418 people in Port Hawkesbury, Lordways, and Isle Madame. This means these constituents do not have access to preventative medicine, such as an annual physical exam and diagnostic tests that a family doctor would perform in order. They're at risk, Mr. Speaker. Is the minister comfortable knowing that thousands of Nova Scotians continue to be without access to medical advice and treatment from a family physician?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. Indeed, as we've spoken frequently on the floor of the legislature and publicly about the importance, Mr. Speaker, of strengthening primary care access for all Nova Scotians. What the member didn't acknowledge in her comments, Mr. Speaker, is that number she cited of about 47,000 Nova Scotians that are still registered to find family practice. Mr. Speaker, that's about 20% fewer people in Nova Scotia that are registered looking to find a family practice from just over a year earlier. So, Mr. Speaker, the initiatives and the investments we've been making have been having a positive impact. We continue to work with our partners in the Health Authority and Doctors Nova Scotia to find more healthcare providers to meet those very needs that the member has raised on behalf of her constituents.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton-Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, this province is still in a crisis, and we have a severity here that we need to deal with. 8 in 10 cardiac arrests occur at home or in public places, but we know the survival rate doubles with immediate action and access to ERs. Every second medical attention is delayed is the difference between being the 1 person in 10 who survives cardiac arrest or the 1 of the 9 who doesn't. The annual accountability report on emergency departments 2019 states that the St. Anne Centre ER was closed for the equivalent of 31 days. The Straight Richmond Hospital was closed. The ER portion was closed for the equivalent of nearly 38 days. Can the minister advise if the province is opening itself up to liability by not providing consistent emergency room access?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for raising the important topic of heart health, Mr. Speaker, particularly as the month of February winds down, a month to recognize and be aware of heart health and heart conditions, Mr. Speaker. As the member referenced about emergency departments, indeed, as we know, and again, have had many conversations on the floor of this legislature, that remains a key area that we are focused on for increasing availability of healthcare providers, not just physicians. In some communities, in fact, Mr. Speaker, it's a nursing coverage that results in the emergency department closures. But, Mr. Speaker, we continue to invest. We're investing in expanding training opportunities for nurses, nurse practitioners, Mr. Speaker. We've expanded training opportunities for physicians, Mr. Speaker, and we've increased our investment, Mr. Speaker, in compensation for those physicians as well, Mr. Speaker, so that in our new master agreement with Doctors Nova Scotia, they will be the highest paid in Atlantic Canada.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Alton Gas case was originally scheduled to be heard in mid-August, and that's why Mr. Cameron received instructions late July, meeting with the departments, with the deputies, but it was scheduled to be heard in mid-August, but on August 15th it was rescheduled. But the brief was still prepared and sat in the department and probably the number of deputies' hands, and many people in the department knew what was in the brief. I'd like to ask the Premier, as the minister responsible for that department, if the brief sat in the department from August 2nd, is it really his position that he was completely unaware of this brief until November 17th?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, it was, I think, November 9th. I think it was November 9th that I'm made aware by the member from Truro, Bible Hill, Salmon River, Millbrook.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The brief was prepared after some discussion back and forth. It was a pretty contentious situation within the department. We can tell that from the affidavits. In fact, it was this file was described within the department as a quote-unquote bomb. I'd like to ask the Premier: is it the Premier's practice to be completely unaware of briefs and files that are described as bombs in his department, completely unaware until a member of the opposition raises it on the floor of the legislature 3 months later?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, you can tell by the very description that the department would have given him, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the reality of it is they understand in the Department of Aboriginal Affairs we have a duty to consult, Mr. Speaker, and we believe we've met that obligation.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier's office had copies of all of the disclosures, and despite knowing exactly who said what, and that this would likely be released in the fullness of the time, I guess he ultimately was hoping that the Supreme Court would find differently, but the Premier had full knowledge of what was in the affidavits, what was in the disclosures, what was in the arguments, and he had that knowledge for quite some time. And still, in an effort to keep that information out of the hands of the public, the Premier pursued frivolous litigation in an attempt to hide harmful information. One judge described the information in these files as the only reason that it should be kept quiet is that it would be embarrassing to the government. And now that the documents have been made public, it is indeed embarrassing for the government. But despite all this, the Premier hired expensive lawyers from Bay Street to represent himself. So I'd like to ask the Premier, can the Premier confirm what the total cost to taxpayers was of his frivolous litigation?
The Honourable Premier.
Speaker, it's still ongoing, Mr. Speaker. When this matter has been settled, Mr. Speaker, we'll tell all Nova Scotians.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition. The Honourable.
Okay, I'd like to try one more time and ask the Premier. The Premier is indicating that he can't answer questions because there's a matter before the courts. I think that would be of interest to Nova Scotians. I'd like to ask the Premier exactly what matter is before the courts that he's using as a reason to not answer questions before the legislature.
The Honourable Premier.
Speaker, the Honourable Member has laid out one side of this case, Mr. Speaker. He's laid out one aspect of this case. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Miller will actually lay out his case.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
For you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have emergency doctors limiting their time and leaving the Valley Regional ER due to administration that is not listening to healthcare providers when making decisions. Dr. Robert Miller, Dr. Rebecca Brewer, and Dr. Keith McCormick have a combined 41+ years of experience and expertise at the Valley Regional Hospital. These three, Mr. Speaker, are at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to frustrations among physicians in this province and with our healthcare sector. My question to the Minister of Health is, how did NSHA fail to engage and listen to healthcare workers?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. Indeed, the Nova Scotia Health Authority, the department, Mr. Speaker, we frequently engage and listen to frontline healthcare workers. Mr. Speaker, you see evidence of this each and every day on major projects like our IT and capital investments of historic proportion, Mr. Speaker, to revitalize both the infrastructure and the IT systems that support the work of our frontline healthcare workers, Mr. Speaker. These initiatives have been prioritized and significant financial commitments made, Mr. Speaker, as a result of just that feedback. And Mr. Speaker, I will continue to listen to those frontline healthcare workers. It helps inform both policy and investments that we make moving forward.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Mr. Speaker, Valley Regional has lost 6-7 emergency doctors in the last year. Communication is key, and it's lacking, and we know that. 72% of physicians surveyed indicated that there's a lack of communication and that NSHA lacks the ability to implement meaningful changes and dialogues. That was a survey, 72% of physicians. So my question is, Mr. Speaker, if we have doctors like the three that I've just mentioned that are leaving because of lack of dialogue, what mechanisms actually exist in the NSHA to listen to our frontline workers?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I noted, there are numerous avenues at the Nova Scotia Health Authority and indeed the department where appropriate that our responsibilities exist in defining and setting the stage and the path forward for both operational and policy decisions. That includes things like major investments, Mr. Speaker, in infrastructure. It includes, Mr. Speaker, working with our partners with Doctors Nova Scotia, establishing compensation models and incentives, Mr. Speaker. These are things that we do, Mr. Speaker, each and every day to help inform the direction that we take and the investment priorities that we take. It's also, Mr. Speaker, important for the member to recognize there have been significant changes within the Nova Scotia Health Authority executive ranks, including a new CEO, Mr. Speaker, that just joined the organization in December.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Mr. Speaker, in 2014, Nova Scotia's ERs closed 444 times. By 2017, that number jumped to 836. And recently, data now shows that Nova Scotia ERs closed 1,500 times. I will actually table that document with those figures. Rural areas, Mr. Speaker, in Nova Scotia are suffering the most, and we all know this. And we know that the primary reason that ER closures is happening is lack to the coverage of lack of doctors. So we're not recruiting and retaining our doctors. We all know that. And my question to the Minister of Health is, why are there actually so many ER closures? What is the reason?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. Indeed, the reason for closure of an emergency department varies from community to community, Mr. Speaker. In some communities, it is indeed the availability of a physician to provide the services needed at the emergency department for a particular shift. In some cases, Mr. Speaker, it's other healthcare providers like nurses. But, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, we recognize the important need to recruit and retain healthcare providers and professionals. Like to note for the member that, in fact, Nova Scotia, despite the challenges of physician availability across the country and indeed most of the Western world, Nova Scotia has the highest number of physicians per capita in the country, Mr. Speaker. We've seen increased investments that will see physicians in Nova Scotia the highest paid in Atlantic Canada, and over the past 18 months or so, we've had 873 days that have been covered through incentive programs targeted towards emergency departments to address the very issue the members raised.
The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and great, but you still have not fulfilled your promise of 2013, a doctor for every Nova Scotian, right? I mean, like, this continues on, and it's becoming chronic. It's so frustrating. Yes, steps are being made. I agree. Wonderful. Pat yourselves on the back. But there's still many
Time allotted for oral questions put by members to ministers has expired. We'll now move on to government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government business for today. I move that the House to now rise to meet again tomorrow, Friday, February 21st, 2020, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Following the daily routine in QP, business will include second reading on Bills 220 and 221.
Just before I do that motion, the Honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on a point of order. Earlier in question period, when I questioned the Premier about the affordable housing crisis, the Premier characterized my comments or questions as misrepresenting the reality of the housing issue to Nova Scotians. And I believe that misrepresenting is unparliamentary language, and I would ask that the Premier retract his statement. Thank you.
I will review Hansard and come back to the House. So we're back to the motion for adjournment. The motion is for the House to rise to meet again tomorrow, Friday, February 21st, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The House now stands adjourned until tomorrow at 9 a.m.